All right. Hello. Welcome to episode 7. Today is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode because the topic itself is a little bit more pointed. And then also because my husband is going to be getting home from work shortly. And I kind of transform our house into my studio. So let's just hope he doesn't walk into the door. Let's just hope he doesn't walk in the door when I am recording. It's funny because when I'm recording, I'm like, please don't come home. Love you. Anyways, today was already going to be a little bit shorter, as I said, just because of the topic itself, which is finding your anchor. And what I mean by that is life can get so chaotic. Either moving countries, just moving in general, new jobs, relationships, family life, hobbies, all of it. And at some point in life, you need to know what you're holding on to. So, what do you reach for when life feels like too much? That's what I'm talking about today. And I'm going to talk about it from my perspective, starting with a couple of times that I have felt unanchored. As I was creating my list, I was like, well, maybe I just shouldn't live abroad because half of the things that are like the times when I'm looking back that I felt like adrift are in transition periods between countries or between places. So my list currently looks like a few times I felt unanchored. Texas to Spain, that first time when I was homesick, as I mentioned, 10 years ago as an au pair. China, I did a summer in China. Getting there, like I was really thrown off initially. Just the culture shock. And I don't know, the time difference. That was rough. That was super rough. But specifically China sticks out in my head. And then Texas to Prague and Prague to Finland. So yeah. Okay. And then I also had a couple of, in Peru, I spent a summer. Basically, I can just look back and be like, what are the times that I felt unanchored? And a lot of them have to do with, life transitions of places and cultures. But I also do have a couple of other items on my list that are not place related, such as winter depression, life decisions. I put US versus Finland, but really most life decisions. And then my last one on this list is actually anchor and soar, which I want to get into what that means to me and why that's on my list. So, what I mean in general when I say anchor, it means like the things, what is grounding you? What is that thing that keeps you sane when everything else feels insane? And this is where anchor and soar comes into play, because this is actually the name of one of my blogs that I started. I think I mentioned in the very first welcome episode that I have tried to do creative things over the years, and I've randomly started I think I've started 2 or 3 different blogs, and they always last a couple of months. And one of them was called, the most recent one was called Anchor and Soar. And actually, here in Finland, I also have a business. I'm a freelancer, and I had to give my company a name, and it's called Anchor and Soar. It's not anything super well established, but it's more of this name that I've held on to in the last 10 years. And I remember when I came up with the name, I was like, yes, this is it. And that name came from me thinking gosh, I am a homebody who loves to travel. And those are such conflicting feelings. Being a homebody who loves to travel, I think this is where that homesickness has stemmed from. I love home. I do. I love my friends. I love my family. I love a lot about Texas. It's where I grew up. It's where I feel most understood. So, of course, I love home. It's where I feel most at home. But then there's this other part of me that is so drawn to life abroad and is so drawn to or just so addicted to that feeling of being in a new place and figuring out a new environment. So when I was coming up with my latest blog name, I was trying to really I was thinking about that tension there, the tension between being a homebody who loves to travel and what also keeps me sane when I do travel, because then it is super hard because I miss home, and it is anchoring. Anchoring in what? For me, that's my faith. Absolutely 100%. Knowing and having that faith in God is the most fundamental anchor of all. But let me back up for a minute and just talk about the phrase as a whole, or the name as a whole, anchor and soar. Anchor, your things that ground you either emotionally or physically. So, your faith, that can definitely ground you, or more physical things like going to your favorite coffee shop or having a morning routine. What are those things that ground you? So, anchor and then soar. To be able to successfully live abroad and feel like I can be far from home and still thrive, that all depends on having a strong anchor. And so to be able to soar and to leave the nest and to feel freedom and the ability to explore and travel, I need to have a strong foundation in my anchors in my life. So that's what today's episode is about. Let's explore a little bit on these anchors and think about what we reach for when life feels like too much. And that's going to look so different for everybody. But for me, as I mentioned, the main fundamental anchor would be faith. And then some other anchors that I would say are definitely my family and my friends. Having those calls, making sure I keep in touch, feeling loved, making sure I feel connected to home. That is a very big one for me. Other ones that are a little bit more tangible and physical would be walks, going on walks. So especially during COVID, well, I've always loved walks, actually, even in college. My friends and I, we would go on walks together. But especially during COVID, when it was a little bit more lonely, walks were they were my little slice of joy. Therapy. Therapy has been huge for me. I'll get a little bit more into that later. And then lastly, some other little moments, little treats. So coffee runs, making sure I go to my favorite coffee shops and actually buying a coffee. One of the things that I remember is, I actually talked about this in therapy, is I ended up creating, this was when I was living in Prague, I ended up creating a budget. And my budget was less to restrict me from spending money, but more to allow me to spend money. So I had to spend a certain amount every month. I don't remember what exactly it was, but I had to spend a certain amount every month on me. So, and that includes getting a coffee, because I get kind of stressed when I spend money. So having a budget, it was more about allowing, giving me yes, I am allowed to go spend that money on coffee and it is okay. Look, it's it's written into the budget for the month. I'm allowed. In fact, I have to. So that was really these little moments of small joys throughout the day that I was oh, I kind of want a coffee. Go get the coffee then. Get it. Why not? It's $5, or in Prague, $2. Amazing. But these little moments, as little as they are, they just add up when you start saying yes a little bit more to those small little wants that you have throughout the day. Now I want to get into not just what my anchors are, but how I found them. And therapy was the turning point for me. It really was. Of course, I have had the idea in my head for a lot longer than I've been going to therapy, because I've been going to therapy basically since I moved to Prague. And I had the idea of anchor and soar and knowing that I need to be grounded in something. And way before I started therapy. But the actual, maybe more practical day-to-day, what am I going to do to keep me going when life gets tough sometimes? That stemmed from therapy. And I think the biggest thing that stemmed from therapy in this way was that the realization, or the learning, that happiness does not just happen to you. Happiness is something that you have to work for. Happiness requires effort. And therapy was the first time that I understood that you have to build it You have to put things in your life that support happiness. And I guess for me, my timelines on learning things and figuring out stuff are all kind of like mushed of it all happened at once. So I'm moving countries. I'm having my first job. The structure falls away of post-college life. All of this is mushed into that one experience because I did move when I did. So I don't really know if this is something I would have had to learn when I was living in Texas, or if happiness just feels maybe a little bit more effort driven when you're living abroad or just after college. Like, what is it exactly that makes this the truth for me? I'm not sure. I don't know which of the life scenarios has made me realize this or made this, what needs to happen for me. But basically, therapy did force me to ask, like, what is grounding me day to day? And, and another thing that, like, is happening, I was like, all of these things happened at once. And I mean, COVID was also happening. So when I did start therapy, it was during COVID. So there's a lot of extreme life stuff happening at once. But I did learn that happiness isn't passive. It's something that you really need to make sure that you have things in your life that let you be happy and that set you up for success. When I was younger, it was just kind of there for me. I was given friends. I was given structure that I thrive within. I was given more understanding of where I'm going. It was easier, I think, to be happy. And as I've gotten older, I've realized, like, oh gosh, like, you could easily fall onto a path that's maybe not the most joyous if you don't put in the effort to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to be a happy, healthy human. So I learned, and am still learning, how to create those anchors, or I kind of view it as like scaffolding of like building up your life, so that when life inevitably gets difficult and times are hard and there's months that are worse than others, you have a lot of foundation building you up to make sure that you're okay, that you're going to survive whatever that time period is, because you've like prepped for that. You have a solid foundation of these anchors. I've learned that anchors are not personality traits. It's not just a given, but rather they are things that you need to learn. It's a skill. It's a skill to recognize what keeps you stable and what makes you feel loved and what gives you the foundation to be able to thrive in the good days and in the bad days. Now, your anchors might be small and they might be big. Like, I just talked about in the last episode, actually, how my relationship with Marcus, he is like one of the truths in my life in terms of I can grow as an individual knowing that I have a strong partner for the rest of my life that I can lean on. So that, to me, that is a really big anchor. My family and my friends, those are other anchors that I have. And then we might have the smaller ones, like I mentioned, like, just treating yourself to those little things, like getting a coffee when you want one, or saying yes to whatever small treat that feels like a treat, but you kind of want to do it. Your anchors might even shift depending on the seasons. Now, that's something that maybe if you're in Texas, you're like, what seasons? Exactly. I had to learn that seasons exist and that you feel differently at different times of year. I want to talk about that on the podcast. I want to have a whole episode on living by the seasons, because that's a very big thing in the Nordics. But yeah, so your anchors, they might change depending on the seasons, depending on like actual seasons, and then maybe phases of your life seasons. You might still be figuring them out. You might not know what they are. I think one of the keys to feeling like you can thrive in life and live confidently in where you are is knowing is actually knowing what your anchors are. So that's actually writing it down. At least for me, it is just looking at that paper and seeing like, oh, look, I have all of this. I know that these are the things I can do to keep me happy. I know that these are the things that I do that make me happy. And there's a good amount of confidence, I think, that comes from looking at that and that knowing you have that. Just putting a little bit more intentionality behind your happiness so that you can, okay, let's be super cheesy, so that you can soar and so that you can really thrive. That's all I really wanted to talk about in this episode today is what are your anchors? When life feels like too much, what do you reach for? How do you thrive? And knowing that in your 20s, I think is essential to the next many years of our life. Okay. Yeah, I think that is it. I do think that that's it. It's a short one today. Once again, if y'all want to leave any comments, either like publicly or DM me any feedback, I'm always very happy to hear that. And talk to y'all in October when I am back from my sabbatical.